the relevance of personal narrative in a political context. Since this year's theme is politics, I thought I would delve in a bit to that. And I'm going to do this from a bit of a different perspective, since what I do is to work with LARP, live action role-playing games. So I don't really do digital game design. And I know that a lot of people maybe don't know what LARP is or have a different view of what LARP is from what I have. So I'm going to give you a short, what is a LARP? LARP came from tabletops from the beginning. People were playing tabletop games, rolling dice and saying, my character screams and pushes you against the wall. And then someone said, hey, maybe if we just do that instead of saying it. So they said, they raised their voice and they pushed someone against the wall and said, hey, this was fun. Let's do this more. And in the beginning, a lot of it was fantasy. It went out in the forest. And I think a lot of people, when they think about LARP, they think, fireball, 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 10 damage point, 10 damage point. There's some of that in LARP, but at least in the Nordic scene, that is quite uncommon today. That's not what you see. Nordic LARPs is not about, it's more about telling a story than about winning a game. You can't really win a Nordic LARP. There's no winning conditions. It's all about together playing our characters and improvise from the characters and try to together tell a story. And we do this on many different themes. Fantasy and vampire are the ones people probably have heard most about. But there's like all genres. We have our blockbuster LARPs, but we also have like Kislovsky, but in LARPs. And I want to talk to you about some LARPs that has been done through the years that was about political subjects, where through playing a character and exploring this, people got involved, and not just in the game, but outside of the game. They took it further. They created action. And that's not very common, and that's what I want to talk about today. But before we do that, since I'm a LARPer, I like the whole participation thing. So now you're going to participate, and you can do this if you watch it also. For participating, I'm not going to force you to like play characters and talk to each other. I'm not going to be that horrible. That needs a bit of a warm-up a lot of the time. But what you need is pen and paper. And we have provided most of you with it. So what I need you to do is, like, depending on how your paper looks like, I need it in 4 pieces. So I need you to rip it apart. You're going to write on them. They don't have to be like perfect. It doesn't really matter. It's just that you need 4 pieces of paper. So I give you a short second to fix that. Okay, so I'm going to start with the exercise, and you can do this at the same time. What I need you to do now is think about that you're standing outside of your home, whether it's a house or an apartment. And if you have, I don't know, pets or a partner or parents or whatever, they are not there. So no one is home. But there is a fire right now. And you will run in, and you have time to get 4 things. That's it. So you can grab 4 things from your apartment, and the rest is gone. So I want you to write those 4 things on those papers. 1 thing on each piece of paper. So please do that. And think about things you could actually get out, like I had someone doing this and they said, I brought my full wardrobe. And I'm like, how did you, okay, I think most of you are done. The rest of you can keep doing it meanwhile. So just keep the papers for now. The first LARP I want to talk about is called Mellan himmel och hav, Between Heaven and Sea. It was run in 2004, so it's quite a while ago now. And it was about family, about gender, about heterosexuality and monogamy. And I wanted to question these things. It was a science fiction LARP with focus on love and marriage, inspired by the writer Ursula Le Guin. And what they did was that they created new genders. They created morning people and evening people. And what sex you had was not relevant. The relevant was what kind of gender you had. And the morning people, they went up early. They were in charge of everything that was domestic and practical. And they were the sensual subjects. The evening people, they were up all night. They were in charge of the political and the public. And they were the sensual objects. And in this world, all marriage happened between 4 people. 2 evening people and 2 morning people. And the LARP was about making one of those marriages happen. And they played with gender as we know it a lot through the way they dressed. Everyone was wearing kind of the same outfit. I'm sorry about the quality here on the picture, but it's not that many pictures from the LARP and it's kind of old, so that's the way it is. They decided that everyone had to shave. Couldn't have body hair, or you could have hair on your head, but you had to shave your armpits and you couldn't have a beard. Everything had to go. They also played with lights, so they could get more days into the actual days we were playing. They were making it shorter. And at this time, in 2003, the whole idea of seeing gender as something constructed was still kind of new and not very socially common. Today you hear a lot about it, but at that time it really wasn't. Before this LARP, they workshop about this a bit. But what was interesting was that through playing these characters in this world, the players come out of the LARP and had a totally different view on gender. All of a sudden, they realize gender might be something we create. One of the players said doing this, after a while, I felt that my character, like the way she was a morning person, that it felt like me, like it was natural. And before the LARP, some of the things that described a morning person was not something I could relate to. But after, it felt so real that it felt as real as some of the things that I think make me a woman, that is important for me in being a woman. And I feel the same way about this now. And I'm not sure what to do with that. And that, I think, is very interesting. It didn't just change the players. It actually had an impact on a lot of the Nordic LARP community. The way we started looking at gender and playing with gender in LARPs changed after this LARP. What also happened was that about 6 months after the LARP, more than half of the participants that was in a relationship before going to the LARP had ended their relationship. Because they realized they didn't look at relationships in the same way anymore. That is a huge impact outside of the LARP. And the organizers were, of course, hoping for making people aware of this, but I don't think they had planned to have this kind of effect. But through relating to the character, this could happen. And so it begins. When you woke up, you realized that the world isn't what it used to be. Things had changed. Because of the natural disasters, world now looked different. We had a lot of climate refugees coming. It was a shortage on food. It's hard to get a job, it's hard to get by. But you're trying. You're trying to live a normal life. But not that long ago, you ended up in a bad place. You realized you didn't have enough food. And you really, really needed more food. So you decided to go to the black market. So you brought your things and you sold one of them to get food. Now I want you to look at your papers and choose one thing that you sold to get food. I want you to represent this by taking the paper, tear it in two, scrumble it up, and throw it on the floor. The next LARP I'm going to talk about is called Halatisar. That means State of the Siege in English. It's a LARP that was made in 2013, and the organizer were a combo of Finnish LARPers and Palestinian LARPers. And this had a very clear political statement, because it was about the war in Palestine, about the conflict. And they wanted to make people feel how it is to live an everyday life under occupation. So they created a world that was switched around, where the Arab world and Europe were kind of the opposite against what they're today. So we had a war going on in the Nordic countries. And the main plots and stories in this LARP were Palestinian, but the culture was Finnish. to bring it closer to the Finnish players. All the characters that was played were based on real events and things that had happened in Palestine to either the organizers or friends of theirs. So this was built into the characters. They also created fake political parties that kind of represented the ones that exist there today. The characters were either students at a university, just trying to live their everyday life, or they were playing journalists that was specializing in the Northern European conflict and was there and trying to report about it. And when the journalists were reporting about this, they actually wrote news and put up on a wall so everyone could like see the paper and see what happened. And the journalists had, of course, had their interest in why they wanted to report about this and the magazine they were coming from. So a lot of the players could all of a sudden see what the magazines wrote about a conflict they were a part of and how that didn't really match what they felt had happened. Was it fake news? Or was it another way to look at it? Well, maybe both. You could also play a human rights activist who had come to stand in solidarity with the Finns and get a chance to feel powerless when you try to change something and the oppressors doesn't really care about your organization. After this LARP, and the feeling of being part of that and playing it, a lot of the players started to boycott products from Israel because of this LARP. Since this was in 2013, in 2014, when the war in Gaza happened, a lot of the players went out and demonstrated in their home countries, because the players were from many different countries. It led to action outside of the game, because they were involved, because their characters made it feel relevant. One year has now passed. Things are starting to get slightly better, like society is starting to find its place in this new world. But there still is a lot of problems left to fix. During this year, someone broke into your home and they stole one of your things. To represent this, I want you to turn your papers upside down so you don't see the text. And I want you to mix them up. And then you pull one paper at random. Tear it apart, crinkle it up, and you throw it on the floor. This is Just a Little Loving. It's a game that was created in 2011, but it has been run many times and it's still being run. They're going to run it in England, I think, in 2019. So this is something you can play if you want to. It's a LARP about AIDS in the 80s. It's about lust, fear of death, and friendship. It's about a hip community of gay people in New York that went out to celebrate the 4th of July. outside of the city. There they meet another group that are cancer survivors that had cancer as children and have kept meeting there each year for 4th of July to celebrate life together. And now they decide to make the party together. You play 4th of July, the party day, in 82. Then you take a break and you make a time jump and you play it again the next morning, but in 83. And then you do it again and you play it in 84. And the first year, no one really knows about AIDS yet. In 82, some people had died, but it was not really common knowledge in that way. So no one is really thinking a lot about it. So focus is on lust, on having fun, on partying. When you play 83, people have started dying. No one knows why. No one knows how this disease is transmitted. It's all about fear of death. And when you play 84, the organizers has made a short, narrative freedom choice here, because it was actually in 85. They managed to understand how it was transmitted, but they moved it to 84. So then you know about it. But people are still already sick and dying, but it's about the community, about the friendship and the bonds and helping those that are still sick and creating this strong society together. In this LARP, character can die. Then you come next year as a new character. And then people have memorial rituals over the ones who have died. So you can be at a ritual and see someone releasing one of those Chinese lanterns as a memory of your character that is already dead. They also wanted to handle death in a good way, because not everyone got sick. Survivor's guilt is a thing. And to do this, they wanted to give the player a bit of choice, but they also wanted chance. So when you played 1 year, you go into this meta stage. You're still your character, but it's not actually happening. And you get a visit from death showing up. And you get to play the lottery of death. And what they do is they ask you to write your character's name on a paper, on a little slip. And you get to decide how many slips, between 1 and 5, depending on how your character has lived their life during this year. Have they been really promiscuous? Then you probably write 5. If not, you at least have to put 1. You put them in the hat and then you start pulling names. This means even if you just put 1 note in there, you might be the one. And someone who has been all over might still be fine. You actually play the funerals also. I've played this LARP twice myself. And it's an amazing experience. I highly recommend you to try it out. But each time it has been played, what I know of, we have had HIV positive players in the games. Because there has been a lot of media around this LARP saying that you can't play with this kind of subject. It's not okay. I think it is, but you can't make fun of it, which is not what this LARP is doing. But one of another things in this LARP is also about the LGBTQL community, obviously, since it's a lot about the gay community. And after this LARP, a lot of the players became activists and started working for the rights of the LGBTQI community and about teaching people about HIV and how it works today and where the research is and so on. It really had effect outside. It changed things. Because being one of those characters, seeing people you cared about die around you, it affected you. And I'm not saying it's the same thing as being there for real, because it's not. But it helps you understand it a bit better, even if it's not the same thing. Look at the papers you have in your hand. These are the things you have left since before the chaos, since before everything started, since the whole catastrophe happened, from life before. Did you make the right choice? Did you pick the right things? Are they more or less important now? This exercise is from a LARP that I run with schools, mostly with 14-year-olds, that we have written. It's called Katastroftillstånd. That would be disaster condition, I guess. And it's an educational LARP. It has focus on teaching about sustainability. And we want to be able to, teaching and educating is about change. It's about making people see things in a new way. And we want that to happen. But the difference is when you do an ordinary LARP or an ordinary digital game, people who plays it are mostly interested. Like, that's why they choose to play it to begin with. When you do a LARP in a school, well, it's mandatory. They didn't choose to do that. They're also 14 and really cool. They're not gonna play. And one of the important things here to make this happen, to make the change happen, is that you need people to immerse with the characters. Otherwise, it won't work. Like, you need to really immerse. And one way to help with immersion is to make it relevant for your players. And by putting something of them in there, it becomes relevant. We run the LARP without this exercise a couple of times. It didn't really work as well. When we put this in, we always had someone going, "No, not my Xbox, shit!" They get like frustrated, and I'm going, yes, more emotions. Now you're getting immersed. Now it's relevant. All of a sudden, what's important to your character is also important to you. So this is a tool you can use. These are some of the conclusions I want to send with you. Make it relevant to the players. Make the characters believable. Make you feel that you're one of them. And learn the story through the character's perspective, because that will change how they look at things. And empathy happens through connection. Like, if you play a game and you're supposed to throw something away that isn't important to you, you won't care. But we ended up having a discussion a lot of the time. Almost every teenager wrote my phone on one of their papers. And then we talked about it with them because we have a lot of also people begging in the streets, also here now, coming. And people go, well, they have nice phones, so if they have a phone, they really can't need money. And then you say, what did all of you bring? What was the most important thing? And most of the kids choose their phone. All of a sudden it makes sense. Of course they're going to have a phone. It's really important today. And co-creation in that you need to feel that the choices you make are relevant. I play a lot of, what do you call them? Stories, what do you call them? Where you play like a comic book, but you get to make choices. Interactive stories. And a lot of the time, like the choices are really weird. I start out really caring about the character, and then after a while, I'm like, does anyone think like this? This makes no sense. And there is like, I have 4 choices, and none of them seem in any way relevant or believable. Then you lose me. Like, why would I make that choice? And then I don't feel like I'm actually part of creating that story anymore. So that is something we do a lot of in LARP, trying to create stories, because we can't have a main character. Because in a LARP, when you have like 50 players, you can't have a main character that everyone's is just extras. Like everyone needs to feel like they are the main character. So we need to design for that. And that is what we do. And here you have some examples of how it can look. That was it. But we're going to have time for questions also. And I'm going to say it already like now, please pick up the papers I made you throw on the floor before you leave also. I'm putting it out there. And if you have questions, please raise your hand and they will come with a mic for you since it's recorded so we can hear what you say.
Hello. Thank you for the talk. It's one of the best that I've assisted to. I wanted just to ask you about the outcome after a LARP. Don't you think that's a little bit biased by the people who were originally interested in participating in the LARP? I'm thinking, for example, the case of the LARP that you did in Finland, or most probably people who will be interested in participating have already their opinions, so probably the outcomes that they became afterwards more activist in this issue, because originally before even joining the LARP they had already their biased view.
Well, absolutely. Of course they will be affected. Like you don't join a LARP about AIDS and like the gay history if you're totally uninterested in the subject, obviously. Like you wouldn't do that. But we still see a difference in, even if they were interested, they didn't actively do something to make a political change, which happened after. So we still see a clear difference. And that's the difference, like from the last LARP I talked about, that we do, because then we have a mandatory audience, and that's something totally different. But that's also the case with digital games, that a lot of the times, like your players, they're interested in the game or in the subject, otherwise they wouldn't play it. But absolutely, of course that affects. I'm not saying that LARP is the magic tool that will like change everything. I just want to be clear with that. I don't believe in that. I've studied too much pedagogy to believe in that there is a magic tool. It isn't.
Yeah, of course. So it's another question. Do you think can it be done on a digital platform, or you need really the physical presence?
I think there are things that you can bring to a digital platform, absolutely. But I also think that some of it that is important to really get the contact is also about the physical. So I don't think you can like take all of it and just put it into like the digital. That's not going to happen. But you can take parts of it. You can make, like when you start a game, you can make people write in 4 things that are important to them, that will show up in the game. Even if it's like just in text space, but it's like you can actually make that happen quite easily. And I know in some cases it has been done. So there is a lot of things from here that you can take and put into digital games. And I also see, which hasn't happened that much, but some that I would like to see more, that you combine these things, that you make more like transmedia projects where you can have both some content that is digital and some that is physical and so on, to have an even bigger experience. But I do believe that a lot of it is transferable, but not all of it.
Me first? Oh, okay. I thought that was.
Hold it.
Yeah, I thought it was someone else. As LARP are proven as also a very powerful psychological tool, a lot of psychiatrists use that for fear management and to deal with post-traumatic stress. How do you feel that like playing LARP in a social environment can be? Is there any risk in doing that, like especially on themes that are so heavy, like AIDS and terrorism and political, like that some people can take it a little bit further than it was supposed to be taken?
This is something we talk a lot about in the LARP community, about safety, about how it will affect people. What we see is that it doesn't seem to be like dangerous from that perspective, not more than playing any characters. What we've seen is like the most dangerous thing about LARP is that usually you don't sleep enough, and sleep deprivation can be highly problematic. Like that can trigger psychosis and so on. But just LARP in itself, we haven't really seen anything about that. But of course, if you like, usually when we do a LARP, we say this is the subject. And if you go into that and you know that this is, usually you have a player contract that says this is what the LARP is going to be about. We need you to feel that you can handle this to go into the LARP. And there's almost always an off-game room where you can go if it's like too much and you need a break. And they always have an organizer that you can talk to. That's very common in at least these heavier LARPs on heavier themes. So you can like take a break, get something warm to drink, have some chocolate. And it hasn't really been any problems, but it's something that has been looked at quite a lot. But it's also not used exactly in the same way as when a psychologist do it, because they work within another way and about meeting fears and so on in a way that we don't.
Question here somewhere? Okay.
It's a very common question, by the way. A lot of people are just like, is it really dangerous? I also get the question about like, is it hard to like get out of your character? Don't you get caught in it? I would say there is a higher risk for actors with that because they play it for such a long time over and over again, the same character, and that isn't really like, we don't see a lot of actors having problems not being able to let go of the characters.
Well, this is related. Do you talk about froth design? No. Froth. Oh, okay. It's the post experience when you go out of the LARP, and basically the discussions that happen after.
Yeah. Usually we do have some kind of aftercare. Depends also on what the LARP is, but when it's heavier themes. And usually it also is to like distance yourself from your character more because it feels good than that it like is necessary because it would feel dangerous. but also during, for example, Just a Little Loving. After we had done each day, we would take a break and go off game, and we would talk about how do we feel right now? Where are we at? Even during the game, we did this to see, like, are we okay? What do you need now? And so on. And usually we do that after the game. There's usually also a party after the game, because it's good to just hang out with people and have fun after you've done something hard. And also sometimes you have a new best friend and you realize you don't even know their name and you have no idea who they are, because it's their character that was your best friend, and you're like, who is this person now that I feel connected to? And then it can be great to have a party and just hang out and get to know them. But usually we have some kind of after care and debriefs talking about what happened.
Would you consider, of course, the Stanford prison experiment, the one that was done like maybe in the 50s or something, would you consider it like as an early type of LARP, or would you consider something completely different?
Well, you can see Stanford experiment as a kind of LARP. It has also been discussed because it has gotten a lot of critique that the players took it further, or the participants in this case, took it further than they would have because they knew it was an experiment. So they thought, if I take it too far, they will stop me. Which makes it kind of hard to say if it actually, when did it go too far? And there has actually been a LARP made inspired by this, about the whole situation. But the difference is, in a LARP, you know that you almost always have a specific technique to be able to say, this is my limit. You can either break the game and go off game, or you could just tell people here but not further. And that's been done in many different ways in different LARPs. And they didn't have that. And that is a difference, because then you don't know if you can, how do you stop, or what is. Here you know that if it's too much, there is way to say, I'm not comfortable anymore, which has been worked with a lot. And this is usually workshopped before the game also, so everyone get to try it out. But it's used sometimes, but a lot of the times, the fact that it is there makes you feel comfortable to try out a bit more, because you know that you can pause it. I'm checking the time. Okay, perfect. Then I'd say thank you.